Hello and welcome to Press TV News Analysis. I'm Kavit Hafai. Israel is estimated to have anywhere from 150 to 400 nuclear warheads, but it does not allow the IAEA to inspect its facilities. Israel has refused to sign the NPT, or the non-proliferation of treaty. This is while the United States has the world's largest stockpile of nuclear weapons, with massive plans for upgrading them. America's stockpile and its improvement plans are both in violations of the non-proliferation treaty. In this news analysis, we will discuss the U.S. and Israel nuclear weapons and the exceptionalism that they enjoy.
In its latest and yet toughest report on Iran's nuclear energy program, the International Atomic Energy Agency has accused Tehran of pursuing plans to develop a nuclear trigger. The report, which Iran says is a repetition of old claims, does not state that Iran is actually building a nuclear weapon, but it keeps raising what it calls particular concerns about possible military dimensions to Iran's nuclear activities. Although the allegations were once completely rejected and discredited by the U.S. National Intelligence Estimate in 2007, they appear to have resurfaced in the latest IAEA's report. This seems to be the reason why Iran says the report is politically motivated and inauthentic.
By this historical mistake by Director General, the conducive environment which was in fact started during the visits that we voluntarily invited DDG, and also the letter that we sent to Director General ready for detailed discussion and removing any ambiguity whatsoever. This has created difficulties. The whole world, international community, should refer to the past reports and notice that almost all of these items which have been reflected in the annex and the issues are obsolete and repetitive.
Many think it is Israel that is providing the IAEA with the information.
Much of the evidence that has been submitted by the Israelis, particularly, and I'm talking about the alleged studies documents, which are the heart and soul of this secret annex, and that I have written about extensively, these are, I am quite convinced, fabrications.
Israel itself is not a member of the IAEA and refuses to sign the non-proliferation treaty. For 40 years, the U.S. has shielded Israel's nuclear weapons from international scrutiny. The U.S. has over 3,500 operational nuclear warheads, and Israel is believed to have around 200 to 400 warheads. The saga is made up of many contradictory pieces that, put together, they can only ultimately present a bigger puzzle that can never be solved. The resulting conundrum casts further serious doubts on world bodies' motives.
The contradictory stance of possessing nuclear weapons. That's what we want to find out. Let me introduce our guest. American philosopher of science, James Fetzer, joins us from Madison, Wisconsin. We have political analyst Omar Nashabi joining us from Beirut. And from the Crescent and Cross Solidarity Movement, Mark Glenn joins us from Idaho via Skype. Mark Glenn, I'd like to first go to you and open the discussion with U.S. plans of a new nuclear bomb. It's called the B-61-12. It consolidates 4 existing versions of the B-61 into one, with explosive power equivalent to 50,000 tons of TNT. To say nothing of the radiation compared to the Hiroshima bomb, which had a minuscule amount of that power. The United States, in position of this and the 3,500 operational nuclear warheads, how can they come out and then accuse other countries such as Iran of pursuing, which Iran has denied, of nuclear warheads?
Well, you make a very good point, Javier, which is that the United States, of all political entities, has no business lecturing anybody on nuclear power. After all, we are the only country in history to have used nuclear weapons against another nation. And the 2 cities that it was used against were not considered military viable targets. And so the last entity on earth that should be lecturing anyone on nuclear power is the United States. Number 2, what I would point out is that what makes this development all the more ominous is that the United States is joined at the hip with a country the only country around the world, as a matter of fact, that has, as part of its nuclear strategy, the plans to destroy the entire world if her precious little experiment in Jewish self-rule in the Middle East looks like it's going to fall apart. So what other country in the world, we hear all the time about the dangers of a nuclear Iran, but Iran has not threatened to blow up the entire world if she doesn't get her way. Only Israel has done this. So this is a very timely event that the news is coming out that the United States is developing this weapon, which, let's call it for what it is. It is a doomsday weapon. It is meant to kill millions of people in one fell swoop. And so this is very timely that this is happening right now, particularly as the United States is breaking all records in trying to prevent another nation, an Islamic nation, from just developing nuclear power that she would use for peaceful purposes.
Right, and you mentioned Israel there, Mark Glenn, and I'd like to ask you, James Fetzer, when it comes to Israel, well, we can only go by estimates, anywhere from 150 to 400 nuclear warheads, because it doesn't allow the IAEA inspectors in its facilities. It's not a signatory of the NPT. It gets U.S. weapons and financial aid, and it has test-fired a missile recently said to be capable of carrying a nuclear warhead and reaching Iranian territory. So how do you explain this, in this case in point Israel?
Well, the situation is completely absurd. Israel does have a vast stock of nuclear weapons and has refused to allow inspections. There's the predicated assumption that Iran is not entitled to have nuclear weapons, but in fact it would bring greater stability to the Middle East if Iran did have them. Recall the era of mutually assured destruction, where the Soviet Union had thousands of ICBMs with nuclear warheads, hydrogen included, with a standoff with the United States in which there was a long period known as the Cold War. Similar stability could be brought to the Middle East. After all, if Iran had such weapons, they could not possibly use them offensively without running the risk of national annihilation. And there is a further consideration here, too, which is that an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities would bring about an estimated 1 million deaths outright and another 35 million premature deaths as the contamination cloud spread across Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. I believe a principal reason for focusing on Iran is to distract attention from the fact that we have discovered objective scientific evidence of the use of a new type of weapon in Iraq and even Lebanon, a new kind of neutron bomb, where Christopher Busby has been studying the effects of these weapons on the genetic malformations of children, offspring born in Iraq. Approximately 25% of Iraqi impregnations end in stillbirth, and 3/4 of those born live have serious genetic defects. This has in the past been attributed to depleted uranium, but what Busby discovered in his research is that it was an effect of enriched uranium, and his report, which is quite startling and indicates that the United States is using new bombs and committing war crimes in the Middle East, can now be found online in an article entitled "New Bombs and War Crimes in Fallujah" on Veterans Today.
Well, then, given these facts that were not only we presented, that you also referred to there, James Fetzer, Omar Nashbi, why is it that the U.S. President's nuclear posture review, Barack Obama's nuclear posture review, singles out only one non-nuclear armed country, Iran, as a possible target for U.S.'s nuclear attack, not to mention, of course, Israel's repeated threats, especially the recent ones?
Well, I can't stop thinking of the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and the whole episode that the world went through during the 90s, when there was so much talk about weapons of that mass destruction, and then there was all this destruction in Iraq, and there was no sign of any weapons of mass destruction until today. And I think this is the American policy. It's to actually use these preparations to actually assault another nation and aggress another nation, and to actually claim that there are weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons, and in fact they had created this labeling of the axis of evil. So they have to prove that these nations are evil nations, and to do that they actually accuse them of owning weapons of mass destruction and nuclear weapons. And that's what I keep thinking about. But there's another point that should be raised perhaps, is this correlation and this timing between the Israeli threats and the report that came out of the IAEA. The Israeli threats have been going on for the past 2 weeks intensively, and they've been discussing in the Israeli media, and we've been following on that, and they've been discussing, they did a poll, in fact, if the Israeli people are with bombing Iran or bombing nuclear sites in Iran, and there was a result published by an Israeli newspaper called Haaretz. It's 52% of the Israelis. And then to actually increase this number, the report of IAEA came out. Now this raises serious questions and concerns of what was raised in the report, that the Israeli intelligence agencies provided the IAEA with information that the IAEA deemed of concern, I quote. And when they deem this information as information of concern, this is by no means conclusive that Iran is working on weapons of mass destruction or a nuclear bomb. Now, this is the accusation, and I think that Iran has made it clear. It has opened the locations inside Iran for observers. They have inspected it. There's a long report that came out last year, and that proves and that shows clearly with adequate information and details that the Iranian nuclear project is for peaceful means and for economic objectives and scientific objectives, and it's not for creating a nuclear bomb. And I don't think Iran is ashamed, or if Iran was building a nuclear bomb, I think the Islamic Republic of Iran would be proud to say it. It's as simple as that.
Well, they have not said that, and it's quite interesting that you have, based on what you mentioned there, Israel providing the IAEA, which it doesn't allow in its nuclear facility, with information against Iran. Let's take a listen to Mark Glenn, what Israel in the past has said.
Can you say that this is the same level when they are aspiring to have nuclear weapons as America, France, Israel, Russia?
Well, Mark Glenn, that was a short soundbite that we heard there from the previous President Olmert there. I mean, it really opens up how Israel is, in a sense, being hypocritical in the eyes, but yet is not being condemned in any shape or form. How do you explain their stance of ambiguity?
Well, they have to maintain this stance of ambiguity in order to continue receiving the $30 million a day that she gets from the United States. The United States law in this regard is very clear on nations that do not sign the non-proliferation treaty. Furthermore, that the money that is taken from the United States, particularly in military aid, it is not supposed to be used in offensive ways, but only in defensive ways. And of course, we know, having looked at the history of Israel for the last 60 years, that she does nothing but offensive actions against her Arab neighbors. But I would like to address another point here, which is the real question that I think we need to be asking at this point. What is it about Iran that has got Israel so worried that we are now standing at the precipice of going to war and destroying yet another Islamic country? If Iran had no nuclear program whatsoever, Israel would find a way, find an excuse to launch military action against Iran, for the simple reason that Iran refuses to bow down before Israel and to worship her as an idol. That's number one. Number two, what we have to remember is that Iran achieved in 1979 what no other country in that region has been able to achieve, which is complete independence from the West. Now, this is really the fundamental reason that Israel is so worried about Iran is that Iran is going to serve as a magnetic north for all of the compasses in the Middle East, the political compasses. The one thing that Israel cannot afford to have take place is that these various Arab countries begin to formulate their national policies in a rational, reasonable way. She needs to have the Arab countries confused and fighting with each other, squabbling, holding out their hands to the West for money and for military aid. Iran, on the other hand, despite the sectarian divisions that Israel and the United States have tried to take advantage of, particularly since the destruction of Iraq, despite the fact that Iran is a Shia country and the Arab countries are for the most part Sunni, it's just a matter of time before these Arab countries really do have revolutions taking place that result in true freedom, meaning a complete divorce, a complete separation from the West in terms of economic, political, or military influence. So this is the real reason. This is the thing that we need to focus on when it comes to Israel and her angst about Iran. It's that Iran is a free country. Iran doesn't have to go to the United States or any other Western entity and beg for money, beg for political support, beg for military support. Israel wants the Arab countries around her disjointed and confused and squabbling and needy. Let's just call it for what it is. And the fact that Iran is sitting there as an example to the rest of the world, the rest of the Middle Eastern world, this is really what has got Israel more worried about than anything else. It's not Iran's nuclear prowess or plans or anything like that. Iran is the only rational player in this entire drama, and that is what frightens Israel more than anything else.
So I think I could conclude from that the statements that you made there, Mark Lynn, and I'd like to address Mr. Fetzer there on this, and that is that perhaps Israel and the United States perhaps are using Iran to show off their A, strength, and B, that they want to somehow pose Iran to be a danger, while at the same time Israel's fate perhaps in the Middle East is being somewhat on rocky grounds based on the developments. But let me refer back to Israel's nuclear stance. One way it's exerting force, and this is based on statements made by former U.S. President Jimmy Carter.
The United States has more than 12,000 nuclear weapons, and the Soviet Union has about the same. And as you know, Great Britain and France have several hundred, and Israel has 150 or more.
Well, James Fetzer, give us your reaction on that. It puts into light, obviously, all the countries in that context that have and are in possession of nuclear weapons, what that means in the context. Let's go along with Mark Lynn's notions there of what's happening in the Middle East as of now, and then portraying Iran this way in terms of its threats and vis-a-vis how Iran poses a threat when they, indeed, Israel and the United States and perhaps some Western nations are the ones that are the threat.
Well, Iran has been a peaceful nation that has not attacked other countries that never attacked it, unlike the United States, where American governments have refined the art of deceiving the American people with fabricated reasons for going to war with nations that pose no threat to us. Under George Herbert Walker Bush, for example, a young Kuwaiti woman appeared in the halls of Congress and reported having seen Iraqi soldiers dump babies out of incubators in a hospital in Kuwait. It turned out that she was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador and had been trained to make this appearance by a Republican public relations firm. There was no truth to it. Similarly, under President George W. Bush, Colin Powell appeared in the United States nations and made an impassioned statement attacking Iraq for possessing weapons of mass destruction, which was similarly not well-founded. These reports now appear to be fabrications. Even if they were not, however, Iran is perfectly entitled to have nuclear weapons for reasons I have previously explained. And when we look beneath the surface, we should recognize that in the year 2000, there were 7 countries that did not have central banks dominated by the Rothschild banking empire. Those included Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. Today, there are only 3: North Korea, Cuba, and Iran. Everyone should have been stunned when the first act of the alleged rebels in Libya was to found a central bank. That's profoundly disturbing and reveals that this was not a spontaneous indigent movement against Muammar Gaddafi, whom the United Nations was actually preparing to award recognition for his humane development of the resources of Libya for the benefit of the Libyan people. I have mentioned the effects of radioactive contamination,
yes,
which are affecting Israel too, where the sperm count, the reproductive capacity of young Israeli men has fallen so dramatically that it is going to become an extinct nation.
Well, let me bring in Omar Nashbi quickly. Omar Nashbi, it looks like hypocrisy and double standards and lies are in place. Obviously, the 99% of America wouldn't be happy, especially if they know that U.S. nuclear arsenals manufacturing upgrades estimated to reach $1 trillion by 2020. Let's look at a soundbite here from the Guardian newspaper covering these plans of upgrades in the U.S.'s nuclear arsenals. Actually, this is just a report that the Guardian revealed and brought out in terms of the upgrades that the United States has in mind, and based on some estimates to reach $1 trillion by the year 2020. What are we looking at, Omar Nashbi, when we hear this about the United States? I mean, what is it that you can come out, you can lie, and then level accusations against another country who's never attacked another country? Explain the stance quickly if you can.
Yes, I think that the double standards that you mentioned is not only between Israel and Iran. The policy of the United States is I think, a policy that is mainly directed by the Israeli lobby when it comes to dealing with Iran. Because let me explain this point quickly. Is that why isn't there any international and U.S. aggressive reaction towards North Korea, for example, who has a huge number of nuclear warheads and who has declared it openly and who's using testing and has been continuing with the testing despite the American threats that were very clear in the past. So that shows that the American policy is being directed when it comes to Iran to serve the Israeli interests. And another element that actually proves this is the fact that the report of the IAEA came out just a few days after the Israeli threats to Iran had intensified. However, I don't think the Israeli army has the capacity.
Okay. I'm sorry, I got to jump in here. We've ran out of time. I do apologize. Omar Nashbi from Beirut, thank you for your comments. We had American philosopher of science James Fetzer from Madison, thank you. And also from the Crescent and Cross Solidarity Movement, Mark Glenn, thank you so much. And thank you, the viewer, for watching. Send us any comments, suggestions, newsroom@presstv.ir. From me, Kaveh Tafai, and the entire team, it's goodbye.